When you get the call from Spirit, be aware so you can hear it. Don't close your eyes and fear it. You are one with that Spirit. Noah didn't ask to build the ark. No, he was happy sitting in the dark. But the voice from within challenged everything he knew, and Noah saved the animals 2 by 2. Abraham didn't want to give up his son, but the voice from within said that he was the one. He followed that voice with his faith, gave a nod, founding 3 great religions that believe in one God. It's so easy to judge the good and the bad, to explain all the reasons that you're feeling sad. But it just doesn't matter where the pain got its start. It all goes away when you open your heart. When the voice of Spirit sends its hail, don't pass it off to your voicemail. Let the infinite power fill your sail. God is in you and you cannot fail. When God's love shows up, don't judge by its clothes, its hair or possessions, or things that it knows. Judge with right judgment. See the love that's within. Let your opening, softening, loving begin.
I found myself becoming a teen advisor quite by surprise in 2005. And I went to summer teen camp for the first time in California, 350 of us out in the meadow. And we break into families, and I have 8 kids in my family. And they said, "Bill, you should do one of the talks one of these mornings." And I said, "What do I have to talk about?" And then we did an entire day in silence. And the talk and those lyrics, actually, it's a song that some musician who wants to make a song can turn into a song one of these days, showed up. And the title of the talk, which you would see on the program, had we distributed those, I'm going to start thinking of this program as being like one of the 18-volume sets, because if it's not here anyway, you might as well have a big imagination about it. Is Spirit is not calling your voicemail. And what happens is, has anybody ever had the experience of getting a calling, just having something that intuitively you are drawn to do? You know, you don't need to be timid. Okay, the sort of thing that happens. When Spirit calls, it can be very subtle, it can be very gentle, but it's pretty insistent. If Spirit calls and we let the call go through the voicemail, like, oh, I'll get to that later, Spirit will call back and will not leave exactly the same message and will not ring exactly the same line. So things happen, and Spirit has a tendency to become more and more insistent. And if you think back through your life, as I have done, as I'm preparing for the talk, and actually this is something that's been going on for me for a while, there are times where I can see in the rearview mirror where Spirit's been calling and I've let it go. In probably 1976, as I was looking at colleges, one of the colleges that I was thinking about going to was Emerson in Boston, because I was going to study television. And Emerson was one of the good schools for that. So I was going to go to Emerson. And I decided, I'm not going to go to Emerson. I found out much later that Dina was an undergrad at Emerson. So this was Spirit's first gentle nudge. Hey, let's get the 2 of you together. So that one went past. And it turns out that by the time I would have gone to school anyway, Dina had left and was back in Philadelphia. But Spirit's not happy just calling once. In fact, about the same time when I was in college, I heard this great story about a physics student who was taking his last class in physics before he graduated. So he was an almost graduating senior. And the final exam in his physics class, he went in, he was just so stoked. He said, oh my God, I'm going to save the world, I'm going to invent fusion, I'm going to do all these really cool things. He gets there, and the exam has one question on it. There's only one. The question is, using a precision scientific barometer, how can you determine the height of a tall building? Well, he's a physics major. He knows that you measure the barometric pressure at the base of the building, at the top of the building, you plug it into a formula, and you can come out with the height of the building. The instructions say, be thorough. And he's in trouble because he doesn't remember the formula. And the more he tries to think about it, the more he knows he doesn't have the formula. So he's sitting there in the exam room and he's starting to sweat because he's imagining himself having a job that he says things like, "You want fries with that?" You know, as his career. And there's that opportunity to panic. And he had that opportunity to panic. But Spirit, Spirit will call again. After I got out of college, I was working at this dinky little radio station in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And a guy who I had met while I was in college, at the college radio station, ran a company that made broadcast equipment. So I'd switched from television into radio, and this guy tried to recruit me to come work for his radio equipment manufacturing company. So I met with him, and he invited me down to his plant, so I came down and I interviewed in Edgemont, Pennsylvania, 8 miles that way. And I decided, this job isn't right for me, I'm not going to do this one. And of course, Dina was living 6 or 7 miles away from there, so that's like, okay, strike two. But that was a little bit more proactive than the first time, oh, you can go to this college or not. Because Spirit is persistent. You think about those ways in your life that Spirit has been persistent. So back to the guy in the exam. He realizes that he does not know the answer. He can't give the thorough answer to this. But he gets an inspiration. Spirit shows up for him. So what he writes down on the exam is, well, there are any number of ways that you can determine the height of a tall building using a precision scientific barometer. The most straightforward way is to use the barometric pressure at the top and the bottom of the building. But you could also climb up the building, measuring the building in barometer heights. You could set the barometer up next to the building, measure the height of the shadow, measure the height of the shadow of the building, and use the ratio of those. So now he's getting to be on a roll. He says, you go to the top of the building, you can throw the barometer off the building and time how long it takes for it to hit the ground. Use the acceleration formula to determine the height of the building by doing that. There are all sorts of ways that you can determine the height of a tall building. The easiest way is to go into the basement of the building, look for the door that says superintendent, knock on the door and say, if you tell me the height of this tall building, I will give you this lovely precision scientific barometer. He writes this down on his paper and he's feeling pretty good. Because he's got the answer. About a year after I turned down the job working in Edgemont, my boss at the little station in New Jersey had been transferred to a major market station in Philadelphia, and he needed somebody to come in and be his program director and work on a major market morning show and to be a zany radio personality. Well, this is exactly what I wanted to do, so I said, you betcha, I'm there. And it turns out, of course, that Dina had gone back to school at Temple University, and one of her professors said, which of you college students wants to be an intern on a morning show and be at work at 6 in the morning? College students, how likely is that?
A little bit.
Maybe if they could stay up all night and then go.
Right.
But Dina said yes. She showed up. She was my intern on the radio. I don't know how many other times Spirit had pitched that one. I don't know how many times we let that one go by. But those are 3 that I can identify. And it would have kept on happening and kept on happening and kept on happening. So the physics student, by the way, he did really well. He got his paper back from the professor and it said, A+, nice punt. So we can always be open to whatever the next possibility is going to be for us. As you know, I'm getting ready to tell this story. The things keep on happening. Almost 2 years ago, I got an email forwarded to me by Chris Hanifin telling me that the Center for Oneness is opening in Ardmore, and it's going to be this healing center, and I should go to the grand opening. And for a bunch of reasons, I couldn't go to the grand opening. It took a long time before I went over to the Center for Oneness and met Joanna Carmichael. And it turns out that we weren't meeting then at all. We had been in a class together at the Center for Conscious Living in the 90s. We just didn't know it. And this morning, I got a phone call from Christine Hanifin saying, hey, can I still come to your thing this afternoon? So she's here and Joanna's here. And Spirit keeps on pitching until we say yes. So what are the ways that Spirit is looking to show up as you? As Dave put it, we like to talk about being spiritual, but we really like to practice being spiritual because we're spiritual beings having a spiritual experience in physical form. So let's go ahead and do something spiritual. Would you be willing to join me and let go of some of the stuff that you don't need anymore and step into whatever's new for you?
Mhm.
Yeah. Cool.